All right. Well, welcome in to a special Road to Awesome live event in partnership with the Out of the Trenches podcast. I am Darrin Peppard. Joining me, Dr. Dana Goodier, author of the brand new book, Out of the Trenches, Stories of Resilient Educators. There you see that right there on the screen. Dana, welcome in and congratulations on the launch of the book.
Well, thanks so much. It's really exciting that it's finally come to fruition. It was a quick turnaround once we got it ready and, went live just a few days ago. So I'm super excited to talk about the book and promote it on my own podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who are catching us live, welcome in. Those of you who are listening later on, Dana is going to be, as I said, this is a partnership event with the Out of the Trenches podcast. And so Dana will be using the work that we do tonight on her podcast, which just went over 200 episodes. I think you're at what, 201, 202 now?
Yeah, this will be episode 203.
Episode 203. That's amazing to me. Mine is going to hit number 49 this Sunday, which, man, when you look back, I can't imagine. I can't imagine over 200. I look back over 49 episodes, and I just started a process just in the last couple of days of having those uploaded now to my YouTube channel. So they go, 3 a day, and listening to some of that stuff from last year, this January, a little over 11 months ago. It's just, it's incredible. It's incredible to me to just kind of listen how I've evolved as a podcast host. Talk about that, because here you are now 200 plus episodes in. I mean, you go back to your first one, I think I was like, I don't know, in your first 20 episodes.
Probably, yeah.
What have you learned? How have you evolved as a podcaster during 200 plus episodes? It's still amazing.
It's the time management piece. It's the reaching out. I think it's not being afraid to contact some of the big names out there, right? I did a few big names at the beginning, and I'm talking about like Evan Robb, who wrote a great review for my book. But big names like Rudy Cafelli, people like that. And I think once you do have an established podcast of a certain amount of episodes, a certain amount of listeners, it's you don't feel like intimidated when you're reaching out to those big names and having those interviews. And it's a streamlined process now. I do the pre-chat with most guests and ask them what they'd like to highlight. But we always have those 3 set questions on the podcast, and just kind of those nuances for when a guest is wrapping up a response, and then how we go on to the next topic that we're going to discuss. And sometimes they might stay a while on a certain topic, so kind of cutting out maybe some of the other things that we might have planned on discussing, just depending on time's sake. So we're really honoring the guest, honoring what they'd like to highlight. And it's a different role for me to be a guest, right? It's a different role for me to promote my own book, right? So, because even though this came out on Sunday, I still had a podcast episode to promote, and I'm like the person who always, likes to promote other people's work. So, it's a different role to like have something myself to promote and be a guest on other people's podcasts that I've been on a few last week, and I have a few more coming up. So,
it's that's very true. I think I'm recording 2 with other people. I'm on 2 other people's podcasts later this week, and you're right. I did one here just recently. Well, actually with Danny Bauer, I was on the BLBS. We did the live, and I think it drops, I don't know, in March or whatever when the recorded episode goes. But I had Danny on my podcast, and of course interviewed him. And so here I am, the guest on his podcast, and I felt like I was interviewing him again. I mean, I'm still like, hey, let's go deeper into that. And I'm like, wait. I'm not the host this time. I have to kind of take a step back. So I'm sure that'll be an interesting challenge for you, and has been, because again, you've done so many episodes already of the Out of the Trenches podcast. So let's talk about that just a little bit, because it leads into the book itself. So talk about the motivation behind, and I know this is a great story in the book, but talk about a little bit of the motivation behind launching the Out of the Trenches podcast, kind of where that came from, and how you came up with, heck, the title Out of the Trenches.
Yeah. So I've been an avid listener of different educational podcasts, like you mentioned, BLBS, Better Leaders, Better Schools, with Danny Bauer, the Principal Center Radio with Justin Bader, and Transformative Principal, probably since 2016. And so, like, I would have those on rotation. Now I've added a few other, like, lifestyle and writing type podcasts to my rotation, and I usually listen to those on walks or runs. But, I'd reached out to Danny about 3 years ago in the fall of 19 and asked him kind of like, what do I need to start a podcast? And a lot of the podcasts that I like, when I interview guests who are also podcast hosts, a lot of them did get started around the time that I started mine, which was pretty much during the pandemic shutdown. I would not say that I just kind of started a podcast because I was home and had, more time on my hands.
Yeah.
Because of the pandemic, it was because I'd finished my doctorate program and I had more time on my hands that way. So like, that's when I wrote my book. I was done with my doctorate. Cool. Got to do something else. Yeah. So like my, the time that I was spending right with my paper and research and all the red tape that the several last months of the program took to get everything approved, that time I was using for that then shifted to figuring out how I was going to get this launched. And so the first few episodes, I just interviewed some local colleagues that I'd worked with and just asked them their story. And I remember the first episode was like 20 minutes long, because I didn't kind of know where, like, how much he should say or highlight. Right. And I knew he had a story to share. So I wanted him to feel free to express whatever he wanted to about his story. And then the second episode was a former assistant principal of mine who was going into a principal position. So she was talking about everything that she was going to do at her new school. And that ended up being over an hour long because she was free to talk about all the plans that she had for turnaround and positive school culture building and all that. So, now my episodes run about, I would say 30, 35 minutes on average, but I tell guests when I do a pre-chat, it can be anything between around 20 minutes to over an hour. We'll see where it leads. Right. And then you asked about the title, Out of the Trenches. And I think that just came to me kind of as I was planning on launching the podcast. And, a lot of people talk about being in the trenches with students and working, kneeling down with them and, getting their hands dirty and the sweat and grit and the tears, right? And in the book, I address what does trenches mean to different people, right? And so it can have that positive connotation. It can also have the connotation of like, I'm trying to get out of the trenches because the trenches are a difficult situation during a career. So I highlight my stories and other podcast guest stories of that difficult situation and how they managed to get out, and then also provide tools in the book for like staying out of the trenches and having a positive outlook and finding where you thrive. So I know one of the reviews addressed, it goes beyond just saying, I think it was Lizzie Titus who wrote, it goes beyond just addressing one's why or finding one's why, but it's also like the shifting why and how you can, stay true to your why, right? Despite, if there are challenges that come your way in your role or with colleagues or parents of the students you work with, those types of things.
Yeah, I think it's a great reflection of the podcast. It's not about the podcast. I guess, folks, to be clear there, the book Out of the Trenches is not about the podcast. However, you do highlight quite a few people that you have had on the podcast because, again, your passion, you've said it yourself a couple of times, that your passion is, to really help, lift others up and to promote others and to put others in front of yourself. And so there are so many really powerful stories that you shared in this book. Some really amazing educators that have done some incredible things, and you wouldn't realize that they had a trench story, as you talk about the times where they got stuck or they felt like they needed to find a way to get unstuck, or even those folks, like you said, who thrive in the trenches, which is, I mean, there's a whole chapter about thriving in the trenches in this book. So maybe talk a little bit about, I don't know, 2 or 3 of your favorite stories. Don't give them all away, because there's so many good things in this book. But just maybe 1 or 2. Let's not even go to 3. Don't go that far. Sorry, folks. You got to buy the book. It's available right there. Just take a look right there. Go to Amazon and buy the thing. It's $21.99. It's a great deal. You'll love the book. You probably read it in a day. It's wonderful. It really is. I've read it dozens of times. Anyway, there's the hard sell. Go buy the book. But Dana, talk a little bit about maybe just, I don't know, 1 or 2 stories that you've included in the book and why they're impactful for you.
So, not to give away too much, I do highlight some stories of people who are currently working in education, but also people who have previously worked in education and might be doing something in another realm to help educators and just motivational speakers in general. So I could talk a little about Orly Fortune Waba, who was a guest, and she talked about her childhood and some difficult times, transitioning from grade school to secondary school, and some social emotional problems that she had, and finding the right place as a teenager. And her basic trench moment was when she was a teenager and she was getting ready for school and had depression. And, back when she was a teenager, it wasn't as readily talked about as we do for teenage depression now. So, she found people that helped her get out of that trench. And then she used that as a tool to help the students that she worked with for the 7 years that she taught. And after she had spent 7 years teaching, she then launched an organization that's called Life Vest Inside. That's basically promoting kindness and inspires people to act on random acts of kindness. So I was really inspired by her story. I've written about random acts of kindness and World Kindness Day in the blogs that I write. So I thought that was a great inspirational story to share, and something that, she made a film called Kindness Boomerang. So something we always need to promote in our schools. So that came from a story when she was growing up. And then I do have a couple of people that I talked to in the book who had that trench moment when they were working basically in the schools, and they feel like it could be a hard time, but then they find their why. So another story that's turned into a documentary, which is, if you may have seen, it's called Paper Tiger. So it's a story of Jem Sporletter, and he was a principal at Lincoln High School in Washington State. And so he basically was told that he would be a principal at this school that had a lot of suspensions and expulsions, and just really not a great school to work at. So, he was ready for retirement, and he was told he was going to be working there and helping turn it around. And, so his story was a lot about just how he implemented trauma-informed practices, and really got to know the students' story of the students that he worked with. And, several of his staff members, how they worked together in finding out what was going on with the students at their school, right? And some of the challenges that they were dealing with, whether it be homelessness and, foster homes, and not being able to afford different things. So, his story led him to then, after he retired from being a principal, to become a speaker on trauma-informed practices, and use the story of ACEs, the ACEs study, to inform schools more about that. And, we're still talking today in many schools about how can we identify ACEs in kids, and how can we treat our kids with kindness and, in a trauma-informed lens and all that. So, and I really like highlighting these people who, they've done something to really make a difference in educators' lives, right? I'm really interested in school leadership and culture, and really transforming school culture. But when it trickles down to the students, when it comes to kindness, when it comes to how we're interacting with our students, right, and seeing the broader lens of their behaviors or communication, right? Those are things that I want others to read about, right? So as we said, the book's not bad about the podcast. I do highlight tidbits from those people's stories, but it's also interwoven with some tips, a little bit of a self-help book. Also talks about my trench stories and some of the challenges that I've had and how I've worked through them and moved past them, right? Because a lot of the things that I thought had happened, a lot of other people might not have experienced. And sometimes I think in books we often read like about people being supported, right? And a lot of the time I've had to kind of reach out for that support from people like Danny Bauer, who I've been connected to for about 4 years, and find my own path right through some of these groups like the Mastermind and podcasts that I'm listening to, and now being involved in the Teach Better team and things like that. So so it's a different path that people take, and it's how they get that support and how they now I like to promote others and show what they've done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the book does a great job of that. And at the same time, like you said, it's telling a lot of your story. I've known you now for probably about 2 years.
Yeah, a little over 2 years.
And you just, and you mentioned Teach Better. We actually get to meet in person in October this year at the Teach Better conference, which was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. Shout out to our Teach Better family. Man, I was going somewhere with this, and I'm sure it was important. I remember. There you go. It's an informal podcast. What I was thinking was how, going through some of the pieces, and again, not to give away much from the book, but I was not aware of some of the pieces in your story, leading up to, you living overseas, you coming back, and just how you found your way. I mean, obviously when you and I met, you were living, in Colorado where you are now. And, I think sometimes this is a great lesson for all of us. Sometimes we make an assumption, so-and-so is in, this particular location, for you in Lone Tree. And, well, that's just where they've always been. Not even close. Your story, and it's really great. Shout out to Jess Peppard, your editor. She did a brilliant job of restructuring, some of the pieces so that your story just feathers throughout that book. And man, there were just so many cool things I learned about you. And to me, that's what a great book does. Is yes, it teaches, and yes, it informs, and it touches your heart, and it makes you do something. But man, when I can learn things about the author, through their stories, and you did a great job telling your stories. I just think that's super powerful. What would you tell somebody, who's thinking what you were thinking a little over a year ago? You and I had a conversation. I won't forget the conversation, about, you wanted to do a book. You just reached out. We had a conversation, and now here we are. December of 22, and your book is live. It's right there on the screen. Again, folks, it's on Amazon. Go buy it. It's a great book. You won't regret it. But when we first had that conversation to where you are now, if there are people out there who watch this, who listen to this, that are also thinking, man, I'd love to do what Dana's doing. I'd love to write a book. What's some advice that you would give?
Well, when I reached out to you, I just had some ideas, right? I was thinking, well, I would call it Out of the Trenches and then have some type of a subtitle. But, I did want to kind of highlight some of the stories from the podcast, but I did know that I had things to share as well, right? Like this bumpy road that I've had through education. So, so I had a general idea of what I wanted to share. And then, I do give some tidbits about things that I share at conferences and breakout sessions and things like that as well. But I think, just not being afraid, I think not having that imposter syndrome. For me, I felt the courage to reach out to you because I'd read a few of the first releases like Debbie Tannenbaum's book and Rob Reiner's books. And, I said, well, hey, I could do this too, right? And,
Yeah, absolutely.
not feeling like it's that most intimidating of a task. I think having the doctorate under my belt and having worked through writing a dissertation,
Right.
also, like, writing a book is not as challenging. And of course, it's a different type of writing. Right.
Oh, it's a completely different type of writing, isn't it?
And I think,
Yeah.
and I had a timeline set for like when I was going to finish the manuscript. And, I did feel a little bit challenged during that time of like, just coming up with like what I was going to include and how much I was going to say and all that. But then, once it did get to the editing process, it's then, figuring out where to structure things. And I think that was probably my biggest challenge, is like the organizational piece. And I had ideas of my outline, and then some of that stuff got moved around. But like, we're still able to keep most of what, I don't think a ton went on the editing floor,
No,
just,
not really. No.
Yeah. And so
just got moved around.
Just being able to like have that in a concise form where people are, getting the main theme of the chapters through those stories and through the questions that I ask at the end of each chapter.
Yeah, for sure. So the moral of the story there, folks, is if you think you have an idea for a book, reach out to somebody. Reach out to me at Road to Awesome, or there's so many really good indie publishers out there. I'm not going to name anybody else because I don't want to leave somebody out or offend anybody. So just call us here at Road to Awesome. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of really good folks out there doing really, really good work. And I mean, to be honest with you, I don't look at any of them as competition. I look at them as inspiration, because there's some really great things happening out there, because so many educators have a great story to be told, and they need to be told. And yours is a great example of that. This is a story about you, about your struggles in the trenches, how you've overcome those, how you continue to overcome them, and how you put that passion for sharing other people's stories right up there at the front. That's where the podcast comes from. And in a lot of ways, that's where the book comes from as well. It's absolutely fantastic. Again, I'm going to point at it right over there, folks. You got to go to Amazon, buy this book. It's already a #1 new release. I'm confident it's going to be a bestseller soon. You definitely want to grab this. What a great Christmas gift this will make. Buy it for everybody in your hallway. There you go. That's Secret Santa taken care of. Just boom, there you go. Yeah, it's all taken care of. So Dana, as we kind of wind down here and we kind of wrap up, what might be a final thought or two that you have that you would want to share with people who are listening in, who are watching us live right now, those types of things?
I think it's never give up, right? Don't stop chasing your dreams. Be persistent. That's like in my conclusion, I share like, I failed many times in certain things, and I share, I feel like I was being very vulnerable in that conclusion. And I just, I have that persistency, and sometimes it's something you need to learn, and, pick yourself back up and, climb out of that trench and go on to the next best thing. Right. And if that is going to take time, just keep bettering yourself, keep improving yourself until that happens.
Absolutely. That's great advice. We'll put it back up here one more time for everybody to check that out. We did have a comment in here from a LinkedIn user. It didn't come in with the name saying, Dana, once there's a Kindle, I'll definitely purchase it. I will tell you, I also had an email, we sent out to all of our subscribers with Road to Awesome, the announcement about the release of your book. And I had somebody reach out and say, hey, I live in Columbia. The only way I can get it is if it's Kindle. And I know you and Jess had that conversation about Kindle, and I think that's probably something that we'll be moving on in the coming months, so that we can get this thing into Kindle as well for people. So definitely saw the comment. I just wanted to make sure we had an appropriate time to hit that. So Dana, once again, congratulations. It is an absolutely huge accomplishment to not only complete your book, but to get it published, to get it out there in the world, and to already be, a #1 bestseller or #1 hot new release on Amazon is just fantastic. So congratulations to you, folks. Make sure you get out there and get the book. I'll give you one last window for any other thoughts, Dana, and we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, as I said, it's just It's an easy read. You know, people can sit down and read it in a day or two. You know, and it's also a book that you can use for discussions with staff, like in your PLC. Right? There's discussion questions. There's things that you can reflect on. You can take different themes and chapters throughout the book, and maybe use that in different weeks of your PLC meeting. Right? It's a book that you can have, like if you're a teacher mentor, right? You can have that with a new teacher, or maybe if you're a supervisor, like an instructional coach, or an assistant principal, you can use that with some of your teachers as well. And I think it lends to a lot of thought provoking questions about what you're doing to continue to be better, like I said in my last comment, and how you can seek out those opportunities to improve yourself, to stay out of that trench, and to never give up. If there's things that are challenging.
Excellent. So here comes the podcaster in me asking the same question that everybody asks right at the end of the podcast episode. So, Dana, obviously we know how to get the book. How do people get in touch with you? How do they follow you? How do they have a conversation with you? How do they follow the podcast?
So if you're watching the video version, my handle is at Dana Goodier. That's a Twitter handle, but I do have at Out of Trenches PC on Twitter and on Instagram. You can find me, Dana Goodier, on LinkedIn and Facebook, and my website is danagoodier.com.
There you go. All things very consistent
Yes.
and concise. And I would tell you, certainly for us here at Road to Awesome, if you want to reach out, have a conversation about a book idea, just go to roadtoawesome.net. On every single page, there's a place where you can click to contact us. Just reach out. Let's have a conversation. Be happy to visit with you, and maybe you could be another one of our Road to Awesome authors, just like Dana. You can get in touch with me if you want to connect with me at Darrin M. Peppard on all social platforms. Wow, let's see. That would be Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok. Feel like I'm leaving somebody out, but yeah, there you go. I'm pretty much on all of them at Darrin M. Peppard. Podcast is Leaning into Leadership. Dana Goodier, thank you for joining me here with this awesome Road to Awesome live event. And congratulations again on the Out of the Trenches podcast and the Out of the Trenches book, Stories of Resilient Educators.
Thanks so much. It's been a thrill to be on to promote my book.